Hello, my name is Megan Varner. I am a health and wellness coach along with a physical therapist, and I am passionate about helping those with POTS and chronic fatigue learn how to rebuild their energy so that they can thrive again in their lives. This population is very near and dear to my heart as I myself have both conditions along with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and have been learning how to thrive with them over the last decade or so. This video is about figuring out what your recipe is for having a good day. I really like to use analogies like recipes and good days when I'm working with clients, as it helps apply what we're talking about and make it easier to carry out on a day-to-day basis for most individuals. So when you think about a recipe, like if you were going to bake a cake, you first have to think about all of the ingredients and how much of each ingredient, along with how you're going to combine the ingredients and how long you're going to bake whatever, cook whatever you're making. So how does this apply to figuring out what is in a good day if you have POTS? Well, for most of us, it's not all a guessing game as to what your triggers are and what things drain your energy. And there's a certain combination of things that really help us feel better. There's common things like salt, compression, rest, a certain amount of exercise, eating a certain diet that definitely apply. When I'm working with clients, I like to use the analogy that when we're baking, we divide things up into different categories. Typically, you put all the wet ingredients in this bowl and you put all the dry ingredients in this bowl, and then you mix one into the next in this order so that your cake comes out correctly and it's not a hard brick. So in this case, if you think about 5 categories, that all of these have some pretty good research backing that help us feel our best both mentally and physically, you're able to begin to structure what your recipe for a good day would be like. So one big category is nutrition. That can look a little bit different for all of us, but there are a couple key factors I'll talk about in a minute that can help those of us with POTS feel our best. The other categories are rest, movement, social interaction, and light. These are very basic, but hang with me, important. So, figuring out what each of these categories look like or what ingredients fall into each of these categories can be key to feeling your best. So, back to the category of nutrition. I do not push a certain type of diet with clients because I do feel that we are all very unique in what type of diet helps us thrive, but there are some common trends. For many of us with POTS, we thrive on a higher protein diet with fewer carbs. That does not necessarily mean low carb. That doesn't mean go keto. It just means that we really need to focus on getting sufficient protein in and getting nutrients from whole foods. Many of us have difficulty with digestion, where either our motility is too fast or too slow, and possibly some issues with absorption. So making sure our diet matches what our body needs is super important. And this is something that I spend a significant time with clients on, depending on the client and what their particular goals are, because it can take a little bit of sleuthing to figure out what works best for you. For example, it took me about 4 years to finally figure out that my body actually thrives on a high protein, grain-free diet. That's not for everyone, but just to share a bit of my own journey, I have definitely noticed a huge difference in embracing that. The second piece or category in knowing how much of it you need is rest. The range of 7 to 9 hours is a pretty good suggestion for most of us that have POTS and chronic fatigue. There is some good research out there saying that you really shouldn't be spending more than about 12 hours a day in bed if you can help it. So trying to get in the amount of rest your body needs each night. Personally, for me, that's between 8 and 9 hours, and then integrating rest breaks in throughout the rest of your day. Figuring out what helps you recharge is key. So another big piece that can be essential in your recipe is the amount of movement you have in your day. Exercise falls under this category, and exercise looks a little bit different for all of us depending upon where we are in our journey and what else is going on in our lives. So exercise for some may be doing things while you're lying down in bed or seated for a while and then gradually progressing to something that's a little bit more upright, like a recumbent bike or hanging out in a pool. It took a while personally for me to get to the point where I could do a regular exercise structure like what the well-known CHOP protocol is like, due to having Ehlers-Danlos syndrome as well. And even with my background as a PT, I can say it was challenging to figure out and took a lot of listening to what my body was able to tolerate. But again, it's about the amount that fits you. The other piece is looking at how does social interaction affect you. This is where knowing if you are more of an introvert or more of an extrovert can be very helpful. Do people typically recharge you or do people typically drain you? And thinking also, do certain people drain you or energize you more or less? Depending upon how you approach the idea of the energy that we all give off, there are definitely individuals out there in my own life that I have come to understand really can pull me down and drain me. So understanding how much time I spend with them can really affect how good my day is, along with figuring out what individuals help recharge me. The amount of time you spend with people in general is something to keep into consideration when you are managing your energy to see how you can structure your day the best, because people do take energy. And for many years, I did not realize that. And looking back, that definitely affected my energy levels when I was working full-time as a PT, face-to-face with people all day long, not knowing how to offset it. And last but not least, the other category of ingredient is light. Light is super important for all humans as it helps regulate our circadian rhythm, and exposure to it at certain times of the day can really affect how energized we feel or how tired we feel. For most individuals, getting light exposure when you first wake up within the first hour of waking has some great support research-wise out there. I know that I need to get out there before noon, and when it's kind of cloudy and rainy, to try to get either a sun lamp or some other form of light exposure to help regulate my circadian rhythm to help me shift into that rest digest mode later in the evening. That said, if you're exposed to a lot of bright lights and blue screens at night, that can potentially affect how well you're able to sleep. I got in a very difficult rut back when I had flare after flare where I was sleeping all day long and up all night long, and to entertain myself, I was watching quite a bit of TV or doing things on my laptop, which actually was keeping me in a recipe to not wake up well the next day and to have my cake or my energy turn out flat. So, knowing all these categories are great, but just like a recipe, and you have all your ingredients all laid out on the counter in your bowls and mixing bowls and measuring cups, and you say, well, I know this is how much rest I need, and this is the type of diet I need, and this is how people affect me, and this is how much light I need in a day. The other thing that's really important to keep in mind is the order in which you put these best day ingredients in. So, if you sit there and think, you can probably think of a day in which you felt pretty good, and reflecting back on that as to what order in which you did things can be super helpful to figure out your best day recipe. So just to give an example, I'm going to share mine. I know that if I get up by 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning and get my light exposure in, that I am set with respect to that, followed by getting a good high protein breakfast and giving myself some time to digest, getting some form of movement in before noon, and being mindful in between of how much energy expenditure I put out interacting with others and pacing it. And yes, this includes working with clients. I love what I do, but I have to be mindful of having those rest breaks integrated throughout the day. For me, those rest breaks look like breathing breaks. I've talked about this in other videos. I'm a huge fan of resonant breathing as it can really recharge your nervous system and shift it out of that fight or flight. I also integrate meditation during the day, and the number of times I do it depends upon how much energy drain I have during the day. But typically it's one midday and one late afternoon. And timing my meals at regular intervals at an 8 o'clock, a 1 o'clock, and a 6 o'clock, and making sure that I'm in bed by 10, 11 p.m. to ensure that I am at least trying to be physically in the bed 8 to 9 hours to get that amount of sleep that I need. So if you think about structuring your day like a recipe, that can be helpful to not feel so lost when it comes to saying, well, how can I feel better? How can I have a good day? I didn't mention some of the big ones with POTS, but I do want to highlight that before I wrap up the video. Pacing your fluids throughout the day is also a very important factor. I typically talk about that with clients under the nutrition category. Figuring out how much compression, if compression helps you, that can be a piece. That usually ties in with movement to help with blood pooling and circulation. The sodium intake comes into play with the nutrition and along with other electrolytes that can be key in pacing those throughout your day too, to have the best recipe to feel on top of your energy all day long. And I will wrap up finally saying it can take some time to figure all of this out. And don't give up, keep trying. Recipe development takes a while, so does figuring out what your best day is. And if you're interested in learning how to put together your best recipe for your energy and want to save some time and energy along the way, I'm happy to talk with you. I offer a free consultation for all interested clients, and you can either reach out to me at megan.varner@guidetoresilience.com or drop a comment below this video. Keep plugging along and don't ever give up.